All right. Hello, everybody. We're live with BWX Academy. It's a pleasure to be here today, Wednesday, August 9th, 11 a.m. Pacific, different times in different places. Um, we're going to be talking today about how to double your translation productivity with Gen AI and BWX. And we're super excited to have everybody today. Please feel free to ask any questions anytime through the chats. We'll try to get them to them as well as we can. Please leave comments, likes. Again, this is all about what our community thinks, and you're definitely a part of it. So very excited to be here with you today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start kicking it. So I'm just seeing the comments. If we have anything so far, nothing. Well, again, feel free to add any comments. By the way, if you add comments to the LinkedIn Live as well, or to the YouTube Live, we'll be able to see them as well. So without further ado, let's kick it off. All right. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is BWX. It's our translation management system. And it can help you double your translation productivity in several different ways. I'm going to start off by showing the simplest way, in my opinion, which is by structuring an organizational unit. Now, an organizational unit is a pretty unique concept in BWX. It's essentially a knowledge management and an access management clustering of information. So when you create an organizational unit, what you're going to get is a lot of gain in productivity because instead of, let's say, having to create project settings again and again and again, once you've set that, you've created a kind of template for both knowledge management, access management, all kinds of rules, right? So this is the general tab of the organizational unit. And you can think about the organizational unit as, it could be a department, it could be a certain kind of content. So you could call an organizational unit for legal material, legal, for web material, web. It could be, you could call it for a client. So client A could be an organizational unit, client B could be an organizational unit. It really is up to you as far as how you cluster information. And you can also cluster it with organizations as well, which is very powerful as well, as an example. So when you go into hierarchy view, you can see exactly the organizational units that belong to any given organization. And the idea is, when you set up an organization, you're creating this broader encompassing of knowledge management that then flows down to the organizational units that belong to them, right? So like, let's just as an example, let's say that you decide that in the translation settings for this particular organizational unit, you want to auto translate from translation memory. Let's say, and you can define the exact threshold that you want to do that. Let's say you want to enable machine translation. You can enable machine translation. Let's say you want to pre-confirm segments. You want to lock or unlock any kinds of all of these configurations, right? Instead of the whole point of the organizational unit is that instead of worrying about these things at the project level, you can worry about them at a broader level, and then they flow through to the project. So if we take a look at this, just glossing over, right, you have the project configurations where you can define the languages for that organizational unit. Let's say it's a specific client and they translate typically into a certain language, like let's say it's English into Chinese or English into Italian. You can add or remove languages fairly easily to this organizational unit, just as an example. And you can create regular expressions that are specific to that organizational unit. You can decide to configure certain rules, for instance, whether you want to send the project automatically, whether you want to count 100% TM matches over repetitions. There's all kinds of settings that you can go into over here. And this is just in the project configuration. You can define the pricing that you use for that particular organizational units, billing rules, if you want to use the billing functionalities in BWX, who accesses this specific organizational unit. If they're not listed there, they don't access that. We're talking about different people in your account, like translators and so on. Let's say you want to go into translation settings. And like I said, we just covered this. You can establish all the TMs and all penalties, thresholds. So essentially what we're creating here is a framework, right? This framework is going to define also the glossaries that we're going to use, net rate settings that you may decide to use, so how to calculate log files based on certain coefficients, empty settings, and you can have that very specific. So just as an example, you can have one organizational unit that works with Google Translate, another organizational unit that works with DeepL. It's very, very flexible. Segmentation settings as well. So you can have, let's say in one organizational unit, you want to segment at the paragraph level as opposed to the sentence level. You can do that through segmentation rules that are specific to the organizational unit, right? And the organizational unit is key, like I said, because it's clustering knowledge in a way that's very, very specific to the user, right? So now if we go back here into creating a project, and once we add a file here, just as an example, we've selected a file, and now I go into continue. Once I select the organizational units, it knows the languages that we're working with, just as I explained. All I have to type in is the project reference, going to continue. It knows the pricing, it knows the glossaries, the TMs. I can always override this, but this is what we call exception management, right? We're overriding this as opposed to setting this at every kind of step, right? So let's go into continue. I can always change the workflows that are involved here. Let me remove regional approval for the purposes of just the presentation. And let me see if we have Spanish and Portuguese. Yep, perfect. Let's create this. Now, here's another thing that's super interesting is now we have the workflows, or the work units are being created, and I'll get into that in just a bit. And it's running the project automation that's finished. So you can notice here that the costs were calculated automatically. Boom. So no more, having to traditionally, right? If you're working with traditional software, traditional translation software, you're probably going to have to run this through a cat tool, create a log file, analyze the log file, best case scenario, import the log file to another system that's going to calculate that's going to create, let's say, a quote suggestion based on that. But what we have here with BWX is really the full cost automation, showing the TM savings, in this case 13.39%. If I want to see the exact breakdown of how these costs were calculated, I can do that. If I want to remove, you can notice that it's not allowing me to update the cost because the status is pending, but I can always bring back the project into draft mode. And just as an example, show this. All right, so now it's back into draft. Now I can add or remove components as necessary. So let's say, for instance, I want to add a DTP component here. Boom, I just added that. So now we have the desktop publishing component. Now if I send this back into, if I approve the draft, now it's back into pending. And if I, let's say your client can approve this via email or through their own portal access. Once I approve this project, now we're going to see the project in green as approved. Back into overview, I can see that every single work unit has a different status. And let's open up Brazilian Portuguese, for instance, for the purposes of this demo. And see, let me just pause here. And Rodrigo, do we have any comments so far? How are we doing? Okay. No comments so far. So let me go on with this. So right now, what I'm showing is the translation editor. So just going back, retracing the steps, right? We went through from the work unit all the way. When I click on a given work unit, that opens the work unit in the translation editor. In this case, right now we're working with Japanese. The green is coming from the translation memory. The blue is coming from the machine translation. The yellow is the glossary. Right now, I have the document preview enabled, but let's switch over to the web preview just as an example. What we're translating is our homepage. Here it is. And now, like just as an example, it's going to get started. We have a suggestion from the machine translation. I don't speak Japanese, but clearly the AI is suggesting something different than the machine translation is suggesting. And you can see that the preview here is working. It's showing how this button is rendering in Japanese. And it's also catching a potential semantic error in our BWX translation smells. It's showing that this is potentially an incorrect translation, and the explanation is that the translation is technically correct, but it does not convey the same meaning as the original English text, and it's suggesting that a more appropriate translation would be this, and I don't know how to read that in Japanese, but this is the overall concept. Now, if we go back, let's open a language that I do speak, Portuguese, so I can explain the exact mechanism. Let's open the web preview over here. And okay. And let's go into contact. Here's an example. This is very interesting. So in the glossary, we have that contact is fale, which would literally back translate as speak, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's say now, let's say we go in here and change this. So let's say we say here that contact in this case is fale conosco. So it's basically talk to us instead a lot less formal than contato. The machine translation and the TM both have the different versions. So the machine translation says contato, which would literally back translate as contact. Contacti, which would be a more active verb tense. It's like you contact us implicitly. It's very similar, right? You can notice from the roots, contatto, contacti, very, very similar words. But in the glossary, now we have a more informal tone that's logged into into our learning engine. Now, if we ask AI to translate this, it's learning from all of these engines, and it's saying, okay, now contacto is talk to us. Now, if I confirm this segment, I can see here that now it's working. Next segment, right? And I'm going to pause here, see if anybody has any questions. Rodrigo, do we have any questions from anybody?
No questions so far. So far, so good.
Okay, perfect. All right. So in this segment here, number 3, if we have login, we have, in this case, this is pretty interesting. So we have in the glossary, we have fed that login should be acessar, which means access. The machine translation is keeping this in English. It's suggesting login. But this is where I think it's super cool. So this is a very good example. So in the TM, we have a context match that says entrar na plataforma, which for login, which would literally means enter the platform, which is, semantically arguably correct, maybe a little bit clunky, wordy, etc. It's different than the 100% match that says logad, different from the 99% match that says also logad, and different from the glossary that says that login should be access, right? That's acessar. That's how I would back translate it. Now, when we ask AI to translate this, it's suggesting acessar a plataforma, which is, if you pay close attention to it from a linguistic perspective, what it's doing is it's merging and making a best attempt of using the glossary, using the TM, and using the machine translation, all with dynamic weighting to suggest something that would make sense to me as a translator, right? And it's also at the same time flagging a potential issue. It's saying the translation does not accurately convey the meaning of login. The more appropriate translation would be entrada ou fazer login, which is entirely correct. I mean, this translation is a deviation from a semantic perspective to the source, but it is friendly, it is understandable, and it's like overstated. Let's say I choose to accept this. Now, and I go back to the segment, now I can see here that now the 101% match was substituted. Now it's acessada plataforma. Now, what does this do, right? How does this connect to translation productivity? Well, we're typically used to a paradigm where these things don't talk to each other, right? So in the traditional paradigm that most of us are used to in cat tools is if you have, first off, right, if you don't have a good TM feed, you'll default to the machine translation feed or no feed at all, and you'll translate from scratch. First difference is that in BWX, you'll always have a feed, some kind of feed, whether it's an entirely AI feed, whether it's leveraging machine translation, whether it's leveraging the glossary, whether it's leveraging high-level Levenstein edit distance matches, which is what we see here, which is like by high level, I call like 85, 90%, like high threshold matches, or you're having nothing really. You're having, as a translator, you have to work through this puzzle, right? With BWX, you're always getting something that's trying to make sense of all of these discrepancies, trying to provide something that's learning. And when you do confirm this, now it's not that we're just entering that acessada plataforma is stored at the database level. Now, acessada plataforma is actually doing something much more. Acessada plataforma is, in this case, what it's doing is it's showing that it's becoming learning content for next sentences. So here is another example here. Get started. In the TM says começar, in the machine translation also começar, which literally gets started. But in the glossary, we have it as a more imperative version, like a greater call to action. It says comece já. If I ask AI to translate it, it's exactly what it just populated here. Smells is fine. Let's confirm this segment, and so on. So again, this is a pretty powerful engine because typically what we're used to is, me as a translator, I would make changes here at the segment level. So like, let's say I would change this to, just as an example, okay, so let's say I would change this manually and I would confirm this and it would override this. But, and let's do this just as an example, and it's detecting a glossary term mismatch. I'm going to override it just for the demo purposes. Now, if I go back here, I can see that the 101% says administre traduções da sua maneira. But in the glossary, we have your way as do seu jeito. Now let's ask AI to retranslate this, and you can see now that it fixed that, right? So the whole point is, instead of thinking of myself as a translator, traditional translator, going segment by segment or paragraph by paragraph or text by text, but fixing things at the local level, I'm thinking of myself much more as what I would call a language flow architect or a language flow engineer, where I'm looking at these different sources. I'm looking at language as building blocks, right? A really important idea in generative AI is the idea of tokens, the idea that language is made by these smaller building blocks called tokens. And a word could be a token, for instance, typically. It's the easiest representation of a token. And the cool thing is that this is a great example. Like, happens a lot to translators. Like we're talking about a big sentence number 6 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different glossary entries that have to be kept in mind. And if we take a look at them, each of them has been respected. BWX was labeled as a non-translatable, boom, non-translatable. First interesting thing, because we're using Gen AI as well, it's very flexible as far as understanding, okay, the glossary had this in caps locks, but the text had this only with the first letter capital and the second letter of the first letter of the second word capital. It respected the same syntactical layout. Second idea, cloud-based. Look at what's interesting. Even though it completely restructured the sentence, right? Cloud-based is happening here in English as the second glossary entry. In Portuguese, it's the 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth glossary entry, and you can see here that it's also same concept, right? Cloud-based in the glossary is not moving, actually not moving as all caps lock, and then here it's fixing the capitalization so that it's coherent with the rest of the text. Localization, a good example. We're calling localization in Portuguese translation because the word isn't that commonly used in Portuguese, just as an example. It's also using that in the sentence. Now, what's interesting is that it's using that. This is what's so cool about Gen AI, right? There's a probabilistic element to it. So the exact term localization was respected here as tradução, but the AI also injected localização because it felt it was necessary to repeat this term in the translation. And in this case, it thought it would be a better idea not to follow the glossary. So like, let's say, I have a very strict client that doesn't want that we have to follow the glossary. No problem. We can override what the AI suggested. And sure, now it's redundant. We're saying atividades de tradução e administração de tradução difíceis. Let's say we want to entirely remove this. Can also do that. Let's try to confirm the segment, see what happens. And now we confirm the segment. Now let me just pause a sec, ask Rodrigo if we have any questions from anybody.
Yes, we have a question from Juliano Martins. Let me
Perfect.
pop up this question here. Is it a cat tool in itself? Can it be integrated with other cats? Because agencies adopt different cats and we need to use them.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The idea is not to well, okay, let me take it a step at a time. So this is its own cat tool, 100%. What you can do is when you create a project in BWX, when you create a new project, you can upload an XLIF file. BWX is compatible with XLIF files from most formats. Obviously, you always have like different XLIF flavors, like different cat tools may have their different XLIF extension, but an XLIF is basically an XLIF at the end of the day. So you can always upload the XLIF. When you're done with your translation, when you're going to download the translated file, you're going to have a XLIF file that's going to respect that same structure. As long as you follow, let's say, when you go into QA issues, mainly the tags, as long as you make sure that all the tags are being respected, you should, in principle, have no problem re-importing that back into another cat tool. So just like as an example of a workflow, let's say your agency is requiring you to work with cat tool number 1. And okay, so you're working with cat tool number 1. And let's say, that you want to work with BWX because it's going to give you more productivity. You could download the XLIF file, the glossary, the TM. You can upload that into BWX, run the translation project, and at the end, export the final XLIF file here in download and upload that into your cat tool and run a check, and that's what you would deliver. Yes, that adds a layer of complexity to it if that's the case, but the productivity gained in BWX is so big. I mean, we've seen cases where translators can translate up to 50% faster. And in those cases, it can be, think about it. Maybe you're going to, just as an example, maybe you're going to waste a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes exporting, re-importing, but you're going to maybe make at least an hour, 2, 3, 4, or much more, depending on the job size, translating with BWX. But that's a great question, Juliana. Thank you so much. Any others, Rodrigo?
So cool. Yes, yes. We have another one we received by email. Let me show here. It's is there any data on how productive a translator can become using Gen AI?
Yes, we have quite a bit of data in that respect, and it varies according to right now. It varies tremendously, and the reason why it varies tremendously is not so much because of the performance of the generative AI, but because we're still learning how to work with it. So here's a good example, right? We get this sentence, and Gen AI is translating this, and it's trying to follow the glossary. So in the glossary, I taught it that engine is sistema, the talent is especialista, and that work is impensi, which is really weird in the glossary, right? Just as an example. Now, let's say that as a translator, right, my traditional approach would probably be to work first at the segment level. Now, let's say that I change this, right? And I change, instead of impensi, which is really weird, I fix this and I say, no, this is tabali. That's how I want to say this. And let's say that talent over here, where would talent be? Okay. Translation talent. Okay, let's change this. Okay, this I like as specialistas, and it's really interesting. You can notice how it completely restructured the end of the sentence to do that. And engine as system, I also like that. So I fixed that at the glossary level. Now I ask AI to translate this. And now I'm going to apply this. Now it sounds much better. Tabali, which would literally mean work. It's still picking up on awkward phrasing. Now, let's say I want to make, I'm happy with this. I click OK, right? So this is and it's detecting a glossary mismatch. I'm also okay with that. So one thing is, if I have the Gen AI feed, but I continue to work the same way as before, it's going to be more productive, definitely, than just working with a transition memory, because the feed is adaptive and because the feed is learning from your work. But if I'm able to work, the more I'm able to work at the linguistic root of what I'm working in, the more terms I'm able to add to the glossary. Here's a good example here. So right now it's saying translate to our model, and the glossary model is computador, which is crazy. It says computer. Let's change this to modelo, and let's apply this, ask AI to translate it, fixed it. Now, let's say I also want to add, let me pick a segment that doesn't have any, let's say a common word, right? Like who, in this case. They're translating as king, which is not incorrect, but let's say I want to establish that this pronoun should be aqueles, more indeterminate. Added the term to the glossary. Let's ask AI to translate it. And you can see that also it fixed that. So, and this is a good example, right? Who is one of those words that happens very, very frequently in the text. And it's not typically a glossary term, right? I mean, most of us, at least I am used to the idea of keeping in the glossary basically terms that have a strong brand sensitivity or strong industry sensitivity, right? But now with this Gen AI paradigm, anything that could be learned from, could be leveraged as learning material, is very, very rich. Because again, here's a good example. You can see that in the glossary, right? Create is changing the verb tense. So it's instead of saying actively like cri, for instance, or labore, it's saying to laborar. Now it makes in it, and then it changes the entire sentence according to that verbiage suggestion. That so, and it ends up, in my opinion, sounding really weird, right? So it's like create projects, elaborar projetos, and then you can see here that aproveitar, which is the enjoy, which is not in the glossary, is also following the same verb inflection. So let's change that. And let's say to, let's be more literal and say cri here, just as an example. And let's add another term here. And in desfrutar, let's add this as aproveite as an example. And now I added that term. And I also want to add project engineers as engenheiros de projeto. A typo here. Perfect. Now, and I also want to say that global, in this case, I want to call it mundial. So I added all this stuff to the glossary. And now I'm going to ask AI to translate this, and let's see what AI does with this. And apply the translation. And you can see through the tokenization now the terms in yellow have been respected. The sentence to me now sounds a lot more natural. Crie projetos com alguns cliques, create projects with a few clicks. Aproveite, in my opinion, is a lot better than what we had before, which was like the idea of desfrutar. That was in the TM. Engenheiros de projeto is now fixed as well. That makes sense now to us as well. And it's also fixing the global to mundial, but it's still changing the verb order here, in my opinion. So because it says 36,000 global translation talent, and then here this 36,000 especialistas de tradução mundial, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. This mundial should be over here. Now I add it over there. Now I can fix this, and boom. So again, the paradigm here is very different, right? Instead of working at the segment level, I'm working a lot more at the terminological, the syntactical, and the semantic level of things, and then allowing the engine to learn from that. So going back to your question, as far as productivity, in my case, for instance, I've seen projects where I'm up to 50% faster using our generative language engine. But there are a few things, right? I'm trying to work at the root level. I'm not looking for the translation that's exactly the way I would say it. I'm looking for the translation that I think is good enough for my professional standards. And all of that leads to greater productivity, right? If I want to work against the grain of the engine, and like, let's say with every sentence, I see a lot of people who will do this. So like, just as an example, they'll get a feed, they'll see aproveite a conveniência de trabalhar com serviços de tradução do futuro, which essentially says the same thing, and they'll just strike it and they'll start over. And they'll be like, oh, okay, in this case, aproveite, and then, for instance, they'll say aproveite o benefício de trabalhar com serviços de tradução do futuro. Boom. Okay, so I typed that, I confirmed that, but I'm still detecting a glossary mismatch in this case, because working should be trabalhem, and I'm going to override that. But I don't know if that's clear from an illustration perspective, but there are two very different ways of working, right? You can work with the generative AI as an ally, as a productivity enhancer, or you can work with it as something that's actually, let's say, proposing things that aren't your way of saying things. And the more you work with it, this is what's so crazy about it, is that the more you work with it, the more closely tuned it becomes to your way of expression. The less you work with it, the more, the less benefit you get. So to answer your question, short answer is we see up to 50% productivity gain through BWX. Any other questions, Rodrigo?
Nice, nice, pretty nice. Well, now the questions are popping up all around. So, because this is the first time we are broadcasting to LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, all together. And we got a question from Mohammed. A good question. Hello. We've been using another translation management software for about 8 years. Can we migrate the data to your software?
Yeah, 100%. So just to show how that happens, when you create, like, let's say, a translation memory, you can, at any moment, I'll open this translation memory, you can import TMX files into the translation memory. Same thing for the glossaries. You can create your glossaries and you can import TBX files into the glossary. That's for the glossaries. If you have, like, let's say, specific client data that you want to bulk import, you can always talk to our engineering team and we can create templates that you can use for bulk importing, if that's the case. But I do recommend, like, going through the work of setting up individual organizational units. That is important. So to separate things, you have the TMs, TBs, super easy to import into BWX. As far as, like, the actual setting up of each client, the details and so on, vendors, translators, you can always, while you can work with bulk importing, I highly recommend revisiting them because the concepts are fairly different. So the short answer is yes, you can definitely bring in your data with ease.
Nice, nice, pretty nice. We have a good question here. We didn't cover that yet, but maybe it's a good opportunity to show. I missed the start, so maybe you are explaining this in the intro, but it's a free online tool, or do you have to buy a license?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's take a look at our pricing. So right now, these are the plans that we offer. We offer the personal plan. That's $9 per user per month, and that works for up to 9 users. And what happens here is that the bigger the plan, the more benefits you get. The next step up is the businesses and agencies plan that starts at $8 a user, and this is a minimum of 10 users, goes up to 300. And then we have the enterprise that starts at $7 a user, but requires a minimum of 300 users. So what you're seeing here, as far as all of these different tabs, right? The quality, and I didn't even show all of this, but the quality management, being able to keep track of reviews and being able to see exactly who changed what, where, and so on. All those components, they're all part of the enterprise version. When you take a look at, like, at the pricing level, what translators get for $9 a month, they get the Gen AI powered translation editor, which I'm showing. They get project management, terminology management, translation memory management, the document preview. They get the standard machine translation engine powered by that BWX offers. Right now, it's Microsoft off the shelf. Sometimes we change that, but we do offer free machine translation at this level. And then you don't have task management, payables, receivables, quoting automations. You don't have the more advanced features. Honestly, at this level, like for at the personal plan, that's not what's going to really boost productivity. What's really going to boost productivity is the generative AI components during the translation itself. But if you want more, you can always migrate to the next step up, which would be businesses and agencies. And it's billed at $8 a month. If you want to go to the yearly plan, then there is a 20% discount. So $86 a year instead of $108 a year for the personal plan, and $768 a year for the businesses and agencies plan, as opposed to $960. So those are the pricing options, and we do offer a 14-day free trial. So that's something interesting. No credit card, no commitments. You're free to try our tools, see if it does increase your productivity for a factor or not. I mean, I think it's, we care about your feedback, we care about what you think, we care about your experience. So we'd love everybody who's here to try it out, tell us how it's going, and we're always looking for ways to improve.
Nice, pretty nice. Well, we have a couple of questions here. One question we got from LinkedIn. Thanks for sharing. What's the platform name? From Gian, let me highlight here. So, well, the platform name is BWX. I think and it's a product of BWX. And Gian, he sent to us a couple of other questions. Let me see. What is Gen AI? I don't know if we maybe take one step back here.
Okay.
I don't know.
I like taking steps back. Yeah, it's a great question. All right, so our industry has been for the past 40 years working with these three different colors as sources of linguistic knowledge management. We have translation memories, we have machine translation, and we have glossaries. There are three different sources of translation truth, for instance. And the way that these engines have been operating, let's start with the translation memory. Translation memory has been, it's a database. Think about it as, the simplest way, the translation memory is like this really big Excel sheet with sentence in original language on one column, column A, and then translations on column B. If you have more languages, then column C, column D, etc. Right? So the translation memory is basically a database. And when you look for what we call a translation memory match, it's comparing edit distance. So what it's comparing is, let's say you have the phrase "the cat went in the bag," and you have the translation for that, and now you have a sentence that says "the cat went in the sack." It's a very similar sentence, right? The only thing that changed was bag to sack. So boom, it's detecting, let's say, maybe a 15% change in the sentence. So it's going to suggest to you the translation as an 85% match. So let me look for something here that doesn't have a perfect match, just as an example. All of these are in the translation memory. I think I had one here at some point. I'm not finding a non-perfect match, but essentially when you see a 101% match, that means that not only is the sentence in column A identical to what you have in column B, or identical sentence in column A identical to what you have here in the source, but you also have context that's similar. So the sentence above, the sentence below it, tag structure around it, you have additional information that shows that this is indeed the right sentence for the right translation for that. So that's the translation memory. The glossary works very similarly, but typically most glossaries don't operate with fuzzy matching. So the glossary is more, in this case, it's looking for the word provide, it's finding that in the glossary, and then it's suggesting to the translator the idea providencie, for instance. Okay, so that's the traditional paradigm. And then typically, a lot of translators and agencies, when they don't have a match coming from the translation memory, they'll use machine translation to speed up their work, right? So you'll go into here, this segment, and you'll apply the machine translation here. Perfect. So I'm applying the machine translation. So now the blue's carried off to here, and then the translator would go in and they would edit this. They would say, and let's say they would add here. So maybe you would make a few changes and then confirm the sentence, right? Now, generative AI is coming from, in our case, from large language models. And the concept of generative AI is the idea of artificial intelligence that's able to predict the most probable next word in any given prompt. So these large language models, they have a trove of information, and then they have a learning weighting system that allows them to be able to infer that, okay, in this case, the next probable thing is a period, or the next probable thing is nothing, or the next probable thing is something else. So it's always predicting the next probable outcome for any given prompt. And that's basically what's called generative AI. It's the idea basically the idea that we can predict the next most probable outcome, right? Now, how does this apply to translation, right? The idea is that through Gen AI, you're able to, instead of working with static databases, so instead of working with the translation memory as like an Excel sheet, and the translation and the term base as another Excel sheet, and the machine translation as another source of information, we're talking about transforming, about integrating all of this into a single thing. So here, let's show an example in real time. So let's say here, we have in this sentence, allow your project managers to know. Let's say we want to teach it that no in this case is, we want to change this. No in this context, something better than saibam, maybe, let's say compreender, just as an example. And I also want to teach it that everything, in this case, instead of tudo, I want to say that todas as coisas. And let's say I want to teach it as well. Let's say, yeah, I want to teach it these two things. And I want to ask AI to translate it. And now what AI is going to do is learn from this. So you can see it's trying to apply the glossary here in todas as coisas. It actually, and this is what's so cool, right? In the glossary, I taught it that no should be compreender, but the generative AI is able to probabilistically infer that if it applies compreender in a 1-to-1 ratio, it's going to create a sentence that's not going to sound right, right? So it flexes that verb. So in this context, it's still trying to respect the lemmatized root of no, of compreender, but it's flexing that and saying compreendam onde todas as coisas e o que precisa, onde estão todas as coisas, o que precisa ser feito para administrá-las. And it's adding also this concept of administrá-las at the end, because this is what's so cool, right? It's also flagging that the project managers, in the glossary, we have the idea of manage, but it's picking up that managers, in this case, is also referring to administration. And it's smart enough to understand that in this case, project managers should be kept as gerentes de projeto, because it wouldn't make a lot of sense probably guessing that it should be administradores de projeto. But at the same time, it's adding this idea of administralas at the end. And let's say I would fix this, and boom. So that's the concept of generative AI applied to what we're doing, is the idea of being able to make smarter decisions based on what we call a collection of context. This collection of context could be translation memory, could be machine translation, could be glossaries, could be past translations, could be style guides, could be anything that we decide to feed it as glossaries, and the dynamic weighting system around that. Hope that answers the question, but it's a big theme. But if you want to read more about it, Rodrigo, if you would like to paste my Substack on the comments so people can refer to that, we have quite a few articles that talk about the concept of generative AI in more detail, and what it means, what it doesn't mean, how it entails, how it predicts, and all of that.
Right.
But
I
great
will do
question.
that. Yes. Well, we have here more 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Um, we'll have a question from Edson. let me highlight here. How can we upload our memories?
Hmm. Yeah. So when you create a translation memory and you go here, and first off, you can always create a new translation memory with a lot of ease. So again, you can go into add TM here and create a translation memory. So like, let's say we'll call this demo, and we'll put this in BureauWorks. And now I'll say that this is English, for instance, into Portuguese. And maybe I can add another language as well, just as an example. And let's create the translation memory. I created it. Then you can import a TBX file, and you can look for the TBX file that you'd like. That's going to import all of that back into your translation memory. And then you can always search for, here's an example. If you go into full text search, you can make sure that your entries will important. In this case, for instance, you'll see the segment count go up. In this case, we're at 1,253 segments, and I can search for the actual segments here. And if I notice that there's a gap where I want to change things at the TM level, I can always edit it within the UI as well. Great question. Next question, Rodrigo.
Nice. Next question. Let me find it here. Toby, will the copy I submit be available to other users, or will it be added to my account and only accessible to me?
It's a great question. Yeah. When you subscribe to BWX, you have your own account. It's only accessible to you. The only way it would be accessible to another user would be if you went into users and you created a user, and then you went into your organizational units, and then you added the user to your organizational units. Then they would be able to access your data in that specific organizational unit. But you would have to basically grant someone access by first creating them in your account and then ascribing them the rights to that organizational unit. Great question.
Cool. So another question, is it possible to integrate my personal AI API instance?
Yes, you can. BWX integrates with both OpenAI via API and Microsoft Azure GPT instances through API. So if you subscribe to the API service and you have an API key, it's possible to point BWX to your specific GPT instance. It is possible. That is not available though at the personal plan. It's not available at the business plan. That's only available at the enterprise level. But that is a possibility.
Great, great. Well, I think we have the last one. It's from Mohammed. How about automatic quotation? Is it is a standalone application that can be integrated on a website, or is it a part of the project management software?
Yeah, it's not a standalone application, but you can use it as a standalone application in the sense that everything that we're showing here is available. We have API calls available for pretty much everything that I showed. And so the idea is you can also white label at the enterprise level BWX. So you could call it, let's say, your agency, you know, platform.youragency.com. When you can then, let's say, create a page that references via API the auto quotation system and be able to deliver automatic quotes to your clients with no problem. But it would require some engineering work because it's not offered as a standalone service. It's offered as a microservice within BWX. A great question, Mohammed.
Great, great. Thank you, Mohammed. And we have another question from Thomas. It's to upload an already translated file to the TM. Will that be understood by the tool as a new TM?
if you upload an already translated file, so
to the
let's say for instance,
TM.
yeah, so the TM is only going to take a, TMX file as an upload, so it won't be an already translated file. In your, if I'm understanding correctly, Thomas, what you would do if you, let's say you have like an XLIF file that's already translated, you would create a new project, and you would import the XLIF file here, the translated file that you have, and that would pre-populate, let's say for instance, just as an example, let's open the Chinese file. If you import that XLIF file, it will pre-populate these segments over here, and by pre-populating these segments, then what's going to happen is you can perform a bulk action, go in, just see that it's all populated, and then you can just confirm all. Once you confirm all segments, then that's, and you have this clicked, also save in translation memory, the segments confirmed to this operation, that's going to write to the TM your previously translated file. So that would be the workflow mechanism there, if that makes sense.
Great, great. Well, so far we don't have any other question. I don't know. We are close to finish. So let me see if we got, because today we are broadcasting to multiple channels. Let's see if I'm aware of all comments. Yeah, I think we are done. We don't have any other question.
Okay, that's great. And I really appreciate all the questions, super insightful. We're very excited about our tool, very excited to have you use it, try it again, 14-day free trial, no credit card, no commitments. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. We'd love to hear what you think. And it's been, we've been having incredible good reception and demand for what we've been doing. What you're seeing here is only the things that we have available in production. There's a lot more that our engineers are cooking in the background, and I wanted to take the time and thank all of our team. We have an incredible team made of engineers, testers, implementers, product managers, project managers. Our team is unbelievable. I want to thank all our translators as well. We take super into account what every translator thinks, how they work. And I was saying this earlier today, just to wrap up, but I think my opinion, our opinion as a company, I think, is that we're at a critical juncture as far as how our industry is going to work out in the next 10 years. And I think using a tool like BWX could be the difference between using AI as a productivity enabler, making more money through the AI, having a better life through the AI, as opposed to being crushed by the AI. And we tend to be optimists. I mean, we believe in using technology for the good, and I think that the key thing is building a very strong community around that. I think if we have a strong community that shares values, that shares ideas, that's working towards the same goals, that's working towards improving people's livelihoods, people's personal experiences, I think that we can make things great together. But it's really, really important for us to have you use it, try it, tell us, and we're always learning and always trying to improve. And in the end, what matters most is what translators feel. And I think how they experience it. Go ahead.
And Gabriel, before you finish, we have another question from Daniela. Hello, are you guys planning to create an extension for audiovisual projects?
Oh, we have that. Yeah, you can create. Let me find just very quickly. I know we were at time, but let's look for this very simply here. Yeah. Simple. Let me see if I can find a video preview here. Perfect. So I'm just going to open this up really simply. So yeah, this is an SRT file here that we see in the bottom. Let's enable video preview. And now you have the actual video. If I can play it, you can see this is the video that's being played. And right now the subtitles aren't there. If I toggle preview, now it's going to load it with the subtitles. And let's hit play again. Now you can see that the subtitles are here. And if I go through the text, it'll take me to the exact frame of the video of where that is happening, so I can make the changes, work with Gen AI, and a very high productivity environment for video editing and preview. So yeah, great question. Thanks so much.
Nice, nice. We have another question now from Gustavo Garrido. Does the glossary accept more than one translation result?
Right now, the glossary accepts a single translation result, but we're changing that as we speak to accepting several translation results. So, and you can see in this case, if it's coming from different glossaries, it does accept different translation results. But currently, the rule is one result per glossary, but you can work with multiple glossaries. So it is workaroundable. But we are allowing multiple different results for the same term. That's something that's going to be up in the next few weeks. That's a great question. I think that with Gen AI, that's particularly important. Cool.
Well,
All right. Well, I
no,
think we're out of
that,
time. Go ahead, Rodrigo. You were going to say something?
no. I think that's all. We are late today, so yeah.
All right. So thank you, everybody. And again, welcome to our community. Hope you test it. Tell us what you think. And thank you, everybody, for your time. Look forward to the next one. We're doing this every Wednesday, same time. So if you missed this or only caught a part of it, obviously, I'm going to try to keep it as interesting as possible, cover different flavors, shades, etc. Not doing the same thing, but every Wednesday at 11, we're hosting BWX Academy, trying to teach translators how to produce more, how to make more with less. Let me go ahead and stop my sharing over here and just thank everybody again. And yeah, this was a great session. Look forward to the next one. Thank you, Rodrigo, for being such a great host.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and take a moment to sign up for free on our website at www.bwworks.com. Thank you to everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.